Hello and welcome to the Superhero Podcast, and this week we're having another discussion video, but with a brand new guest, so it's good to welcome her to the show. She is a regular host on the popular YouTube channel Comic Pop, and has some great things to say on comics, including just how much the death of Doctor Strange affected her. Please welcome Tiffany from Comic Pop to the show. Hey Tiffany, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm very good today. I recently just sat down and watched some of your Secret Wars review, and I saw you were very deeply affected by your loss
Of Sheriff Strange, of course. No, I have always loved just the character of Doctor Strange overall. So I was so excited to see that he was getting a large role in this Marvel event that's been going on. So, I knew he was going to die. They're all going to die.
It was just
I knew
a matter of when.
Exactly. I was like, oh, but he had to be the first one? Oh, I see. I mean, not technically the first one, but the first one I really cared about. So, we'd make a thing of it.
Yeah. I have to ask this to everyone who's new to come on the show, and I asked them, you've just said that one of your favourite characters is Doctor Strange. Could you tell everyone why that is exactly?
I'm sure part of it is, for example, you know how if you hear a cover of a song before you actually hear the original song, oftentimes you get attached to that cover because it was your first experience? One of my first experiences into a Big Two comic was 1602.
Oh, yes,
and I'm going through 1602, and I'm like, this is amazing. And you have Doctor Strange in that book, and I was just like, I love the character. That I love the mysticism of it. I like his overall attitude. I just loved everything about him. And then afterwards, I was like, I need more. And luckily, right around that time, The Oath was just about to come out, and I didn't know anything about Brian K. Vaughan at that point. Got a hold of that, and that just really cemented it for me, because Vaughan just got it for me. Like, he was like, this is Doctor Strange. He is snarky, sarcastic. Again, you got that magical element. I love fantasy overall, so that really helped. And, it's weird because he is so in charge of, like, this mystical cosmos, but he tends to be down to earth, at least in that book. And that's what I know. I was just like, I love him.
Since you're such in love with the character, I bet you're really looking forward to his big screen adaptation in a few years' time.
You know what? Anyone who follows me on Twitter knows that initially when they were like talking about who was going to play him, I wasn't happy with any of the choices. But I realized it's completely unfair because I have no idea what any of the actors who were in consideration would have done with them. We have Benedict Cumberbatch. I know he's a very good actor. I have liked many of the things he's been involved with. When I look at him, I'm like, I would not have put those two together. Yeah. But you know what? I have to wait till I see it because that's completely unfair to me to be like, just look at him and be like, no.
Our main subject that obviously people have clicked onto the title for is obviously discussing a role that I'm going to be delving deeper, even further into this year as part of my university dissertation, which is how female characters have developed over the years. I mean, and in this regard, we're talking about in comic books. It's fair to say, disagree with me if you're wrong, it's fair to say that in comics, when people look back, women are often seen as the second compared to the males in the front line.
Yeah, I would say so. But we'll get into that as we go along. Yeah. I don't just launch into anything just yet. No. But
but stereotypically, when people think of Marvel, they think, oh, Spider-Man, Iron Man, Captain America, or they think of DC, they think, oh, it's Batman and Superman.
Yep.
I've always disagreed with that because I've never really monumentally thought, oh yeah, I read a comic book because I want to see a big buffing action man like save the day and be the hero, because I've always cared about story rather than actual characters. And the first book I ever received was Sensational Spider-Man. I think it was a comic back from the 1980s, and it was when he had the black suit, and it was one of the first books I ever got. And it was such a mind blow for me because it was like, oh my god, it's the first proper comic book I got, and I don't like the character. And my friend said to me, he went, why don't you like Spider-Man? I said, 'cause he's boring. I never really full on got my favourite superhero until, and everyone knows this who's spoken to me, my favourite hero is Carol Danvers, aka Miss Marvel, or Captain Marvel as she's more widely known now. She has been my favourite character for going on 7 years now, because she is such a fun, kick-ass character who has had her struggles, who has had her moments where she's wobbled and she's not certain of who she is, and she's effectively died once and she's come back a stronger person. ever since the revival of Marvel Now, where Kelly Sue DeConnick took over the book, everyone has taken attention to her now. And probably so is the reason why we're getting the movie of her in 2019.
Right.
Would you say that Captain Marvel has rejuvenated people's interest within the female characters within Marvel?
You have to consider when you're talking about, especially a topic like this, or anything that discusses diversity within comics, is the reason that an individual reads comics.
Yes.
Because we know for a fact that there are definitely people who read comics to watch these superheroed people who they rank on power scales.
Yeah, definitely.
Fight one another. And those type of comic book readers are going to be the ones who don't think of female characters right off the bat.
It just doesn't come into their mindscape.
Exactly. They don't think about it like that. They're just thinking about these numbers, and typically the higher numbers come from the male characters. You also have to consider the age at which people had gotten into comic books. If you're talking about older readers, they come from a different mindset entirely. The culture and society that they grew up in is going to have treated women differently throughout the years. As such, they don't see anything wrong with women being treated as, second
as
bananas.
Objects,
as objects even in comic books. When it comes to Carol Danvers, I think that, especially for Marvel readers, she certainly has brought the female role into the forefront. When you look at DC, you've always had, of course, Wonder Woman in a variety of roles, inevitably coming into her own as a superhero. But, at the very least, and this is something that I will always give to DC, for the most part, when people think of DC superheroes, yes, certainly they think of Superman and Batman, but shortly behind them is Wonder Woman. And I don't know if it's just the fact that she has been around longer and, been part of cartoon teams back in like the 60s.
Super Friends!
Exactly. But because of that, I think for DC readers, they're always going to turn to Wonder Woman. But Marvel readers, I think we're very lucky to have Captain Marvel, Ms. Marvel, Carol Danvers here, because she certainly changed the idea of what a female superhero could be. DeConnick's writing across the board has always had feminist undertones, if not overtones. So I definitely, I would say so, because she took a character and said, hey, you know what? Like, I'm going to write her the way I want to write her, and not the way that she has been written, or the way that editorial might want her to be written, because this is more realistic, and that's what I'm going to do. So I agree. I think certainly that, we can look to Kelly Sue DeConnick as, revitalizing, or not even revitalizing, but championing the way a female should be portrayed.
Is it wise for a company to basically say, we're only going to push these one or two characters, compared to the other company that's got several that they can push at any time, and they do? It's obviously a bad business decision to basically say, nah, screw that, we're going to go our own way.
That depends on how you look at branding and marketing overall in the company. To some degree, it's a lot easier, in a sense, to have just the one, because you make a t-shirt and then you just keep reprinting that t-shirt over and over and over again. So cost-wise, that makes a lot of sense. But trying to bring in that so important and so, rare new reader, it's probably more difficult to have a single, character that you're trying to present to female readers, because there's still that mindset that if you're a female reader, then you must like a female character. If that's the mindset you're going to go with, then you're going to need some variety, because I'm sorry to tell you, editorial, but at this point you haven't realized that all girls are not the same, then I don't know what you're going to do, because the fact is there's so many different personality types. That's why you have so many different male superheroes. That's why you have so many different superheroes in general, so many different genres, because you know that you're trying to get as many people in. Two different marketing styles. But of course, if you talk to a non-comics reader and you ask them to tell you about superheroes prior to the movies, because now with the movies, everybody's like, I know who Black Widow is. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, they know who that is. Prior to those movies, I think if you had asked them to name female superheroes, it would be Wonder Woman and then Batgirl.
That would be like the general response. They say, oh yeah, I know that character and I know that character. I don't know anymore, I'm afraid.
Right, exactly. And that just comes from the fact that I really, truly believe that Marvel didn't know what to do with its female characters for the longest time. And that's another thing. The fact is that, hands down, no matter what the title is, will make or break a book. And it comes down to the numbers. So part of what I think happens is they look at these numbers and they interpret them incorrectly. They say people don't want female books. Not, maybe there's something else going on here. Maybe we're not, advertising this properly. Maybe, this wasn't the right time to put this out. Maybe we had another larger event going on. They're not, I feel like they're not interpreting these numbers correctly. Because you hear so many people saying, oh, I really liked this book, or I really like that book. I don't know what happened. Well, what happened was, you had somebody who's like locked in a room somewhere, just reading these numbers, not thinking about what's actually going on around them, and being like, oh, well, no, let's just cancel that. It's not doing well enough. Forget it.
So would you say that jumping from a comic book hero to like a movie type hero that's been well advertised on screen, like say Black Widow, would you say she has a bigger advantage over those lesser known heroes on her own book when she actually got to finish her title at the end of Secret Wars?
I definitely think so, seeing as up until the end of Ant-Man, we had really a solitary, here's your female superhero, and she's not powered, which is fine. Like, I don't care either way about that. I know it's a really big deal that we want to see a superpowered female character. Fine. I just want to see Black Widow be able to be on the t-shirt that she's never on. Like, just put her on the t-shirt. But I certainly think that Marvel was like, no. We're not canceling this book. Because if someone walks into the comic book store who's a new reader and says, I want to pick up the Black Widow book, it better be there. Because she's involved in too many of the films. She's always on everyone's mind if you're a Marvel moviegoer. Again, with the new reader, when they come in, if they have an idea that they want something, sometimes I think it's a little bit of a harder sell. Especially if they come in there for Black Widow book. Because if you think about Black Widow, well, what might be appealing about her? Well, she's a strong female character. Maybe you just like Scarlett Johansson, so you're going to be a little disappointed there when you go in and it's not Scarlett Johansson in the
Scarlett Johansson at all.
Maybe you're just kind of interested in her type of story. Maybe you're like spy stories. So I feel like, especially with Black Widow, let's say you're a new reader. You've never even walked into a comic book store. First of all, you're going to be overwhelmed with the colors. It's visually overly stimulating when you walk in. Yeah, you're like, I don't know what to do. And you say, hey, I want to pick up, a Black Widow story. And they're like, oh, we don't have one for some reason. Let's say if they had canceled it. But, you could pick up, Captain Marvel. Well, what's that about? Well, it's about a superhero woman, and it goes on and on. That is nothing like what that person came into the store to pick up.
But then we have a character who's much different than that. We have Kamala Khan, one of the biggest breakthrough characters that have come out in recent years. Better than Baz from Green Lantern, because no one typically remembers him, unfortunately. But this was a character that nobody saw coming on how popular she would be. She has definitely drummed up interest within the superhero world, again, especially within comics. And it's such a fun character. And of course, we're talking about Miss Marvel. And I remember reading the back of the first issue when this came out, and I was like, wow, this is really going to be good. Because it's a fresh character. It's a writer I'd never read before. It was G. Willow Wilson, and I thought, this is going to be great. Because I love the mythos of Miss Marvel, and and it made me hilarious to think that she's an actual super fan of Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
Sat at home writing fan fiction. And I'm like, you're just precious.
Right? And I think what you just said there is a really interesting point, is that the way that they've created this character is, hey, here's a real person who just happens to have superpowers. And I think that's part of why she is so successful, because you can relate to this. She's not a trope. This is a human being, essentially, that they're writing. Oh, lo and behold, just happens to be female. That's, it's like, whatever, who cares? This person is dealing with, legitimate issues and, real world that we can relate to some degree. Even if we're not of, if we're not of the Islamic faith, that's fine. You can understand, the fear that she goes through, the questioning that she goes through, because in each of our lives, we've had moments like that, whether or not be the exact same one. It's something similar enough that you can relate. And I think that's where a lot of other female superheroes, lack at times, is you can't relate to them.
That point there, because going off one of the recent books, like Elektra, first issue, you have a massive splash page that gives you the entire backstory of Elektra. And to some, they would say, well, that's great, because I can get caught up on the character. But for me, I'm like, well, no, it's not, because you're only telling a select history of those, and people who have grown up with this character know everything that went on. Well, of course, you're bringing in new readers to make, like, say, this is quick and easy, there you go, this is the story we're telling now. Although with Kamala, it was such a better handling of it, because it goes, okay, so big event just happened, we had Infinity, so we need to kind of incorporate this. And it was so weird reading back on old Captain Marvel stories. You actually see they actually hint heavily at Kamala. And they go, oh, look, here's a girl in her room putting a poster. She flexes a muscle and her shirt breaks. And I'm like, oh my god, that's obviously saying, yeah, this character's coming.
Yep.
And then you see the first issue, she's walking along because she wants to go to a party, but like her parents are saying, no, it's not part of what we do. It's not our faith. We don't drink. And then she goes home embarrassed because she feels like crap. And then she suffers the pterogenesis. And then when she comes, she's in like a kind of hallucinogenic state, she sees Captain Marvel and Iron Man and Thor in a kind of like vision, and she's like, well, like, do what you want with the power, like, be me. It's just so refreshing to see the kind of character that Marvel don't have to be so worried, because they built her up perfectly. Here's an unknown, brand new character, enjoy yourselves.
Yeah.
Would you say that's something that most, like, DC, like, don't have the fortunate, like, they're not fortunate enough to do so?
I definitely agree with that. And I've always felt that between Marvel and DC is always, when I look at it, they follow the mythos. Like they are telling stories essentially about gods in a sense. Long after the apocalypse happens, these
whenever
men
will be standing above the ground,
exactly,
saying,
or like the
heroes.
remnants of humanity will be telling the tales of Kal-El and Bruce Wayne. So it's a little more difficult to put a really humanistic character amongst these gods. Even though Bruce Wayne himself is mortal, we still consider Batman to be able to walk among them easily due to his, incredible, cleverness and intelligence. It's difficult to take a character who would be like Kamala Khan and be like, and now you go play with them. Like, go ahead, go be a human being who has real problems and we can relate to amongst these, gods. So I think you're right that it is very difficult to then, create a new character who everyone could be like, okay, yes, I totally relate to you. I mean, look at, for example, a character like Constantine.
Yeah.
Where do they put him? They usually put him in Vertigo, oh, let's not talk about that anymore. We'll still make the books because we still want your money, but no, he can't play with the big boys. Every once in a while, it's
no
fine.
one's gonna like him. He's just a magic person.
Exactly, and he's like a guy. Who cares? What does he wear? A trench coat?
He's British. Poor.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, none of that. Take a look. If you look at Green Arrow, same thing. He's still a man, but you don't think about him in that sense. You still think about him in that superhero sense. When you look at Kamala, you see she is a superheroine, but at the same time, she's still a girl. She's still a kid, a teenager,
Definitely.
You can see the humanity within her. And I think that's kind of where DC struggles sometimes.
She's transcended her inhumanity. That was a terrible point.
That was. What's refreshing about her as well is that while certainly she's dealing with identity issues, she's not dealing with the more troped identity issues. We're seeing a fresh take on that. But at the same time, again, like I said, regardless of what your religion or your religious standings are, you can relate to that as a teenager. You can completely be maybe I'm going through my own identity issues, or I'm not I feel like I, don't fit in necessarily. You can, in Kamala, you can get that. The fact is, the superhero world has been very, not only male dominated, but very, Caucasian dominated. Let's be honest,
very.
And it's weird when I'm so glad that she's not Caucasian. And at the same time, it's strange for me to see people making a big deal about it, because we should just expect this and it should just be normal.
Yeah, we shouldn't have to worry about what colour she's going to be.
Yeah.
She's going to be a hero, she's going to be a girl, she's going to be a teenager. It doesn't matter what colour she is.
Exactly. And that's, bringing it back around to this whole, females and superhero, in the world of comics, I should say. When you look at the overwhelming reaction, or the many different reactions to Thor being a woman, it's why is this an issue? This should be a non-issue. What does it matter?
The fact that we get this a really cool take on a story that we've never got before. We haven't got someone being a different Thor before. And it's nice to see that people are enjoying the book, and it's really good, and it's getting carried on after the Secret Wars, which everyone kind of thought it would anyway. Mm-hmm. But it's nice to see that people are saying, yeah, we don't care about the gender, we just want to see a cool story written by a cool writer.
Oh, absolutely. And I think part of the problem with the backlash that was generated by Thor being a woman was the fact that they made a big deal about it. Marvel was like, we got to plant our flag in this because this is a huge deal. And it's like, no, look, I understand. I understand that for you it feels like it's a huge deal because you've never had Thor be a woman. And like, for you guys, an editorial, I guess you feel like there aren't many female superheroes out there, but there are. And if you make less of a big deal about it and make it feel like it's not alien to have that happen, then you might not get as much backlash because people will start to feel comfortable with it because everyone else is totally calm and cool.
Yeah, I mean, they did this at the same time that they announced that Captain America was going to be changing as well. And then again, they got everyone to make a big deal about it because it's, oh my god, Captain America's going to be black now. And I'm like, we've just gone over this with Thor. It's not an issue.
Yeah. It's only an issue because you don't like change. And when someone yells at you that change is going to happen, you panic because you don't think about it. You don't think about how it doesn't matter. But you don't have to scream at everybody about why you're making said decision. Because you're just, if you haven't even given the book a try, what are you yelling about?
Exactly.
Other than that it's the race or the gender.
Seeing as we've talked about Marvel for a while, I think it's only fair we talk about DC as well.
Absolutely.
There's only one female character that people think of when they think of DC, and it's Wonder Woman. It's not. There's no hiding that.
No.
They have tried to integrate more female heroes within the New 52, like more female-led series. Is it the fact that they felt like they had to... I mean, obviously it's editorials making the decision thinking, oh crap, people are thinking that Marvel are representing their female heroes differently, so we need to bring out more female heroes. Is that kind of what they'd be, like, the pressure they'd be under?
Oh, I think so. Definitely. Definitely. As soon as they put Black Widow into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I think DC was like, uh-oh, what are we offering? Well, we have Wonder Woman. Does anyone else... Like, I could imagine if they did a focus group of, like, non-comic readers, females, ask them, who do we have? And I bet they panicked at that moment. They're like, what are we doing? Because people don't know enough about the female characters they have. And they do have quite a few female characters.
They certainly do.
But nobody knows about them. Because you've got Superman and you've got Batman. And of course the Green Lantern. But when you get down to it, non-comic book readers know those two. And everything else that's underneath it, some of it, like, there's the second tier stuff that, like, you know, more educated non-comic readers might know about. Again, like Green Lantern, Aquaman, Wonder Woman, right? And then beyond that, it's like, and the rest.
And the rest. One of their best books that got... I mean, we're going back a few years, but like only like 2. But Batwoman was one of their biggest books selling because of the different variety of the character. Even when the big storm hit up that they were changing the writer because J.W. Williams came out and said, basically saying, like, we got to like issue number 24, and we had Kathy propose to Maggie, and like they're going to get married. Although DC said we don't want that, don't want like married heroes because they don't want happy heroes.
Right.
And then everyone got in a big huff. I'll admit, I got a little bit of myself. And although it was a stupid decision for Dan DiDio to come out and then say all that, the interviews basically saying, oh, we don't want heroes to be happy. We just want them to be like focused on their job and focused on their mission. It shouldn't be about the fact that they say, oh yeah, she's a gay hero, but we're not allowing that to be like shown. And because people could say, Marvel did that a few years ago with North Star, and they showed him getting married throughout the entire book.
Yep.
You can't lie to me saying that being gay and getting married is your big issue. It's the fact that you're saying, we don't want to show our heroes being happy. Regardless, like, we just want to keep it in this kind of universe. And
again, that kind of links back to the whole, when, you know, with marriage, that's a humanistic quality. That's something people can relate to. And if we take that away, that just keeps elevating them up to this, like, godlike state. You know, like, we're telling legends here. We're not just telling stories. Yeah. Like, we're telling, you know, just, you know, the oral tradition that will go down through history. But of course, you know, when you're dealing with a character who is gay, then you start getting people being like, oh, but what are you really saying by putting your stand here? Well, I mean, if you look at Marvel was over there saying, like, we don't want Peter Parker to be married because it makes him old. Marriage in comics is weird because sometimes it's fine for characters that they don't care about, and then for the characters they do care about, they're like, oh no, what are people gonna? How are gonna, like, this really changes everything. This is permanent. I mean, it's not necessarily, but then if they get divorced, that's weird.
Oh, and
like,
then they'll have that issue if they run over it in the comics in the future, and they go, oh, that's my ex-husband or my ex-wife.
Oh yeah, exactly, right. And if they're both superheroes, then what are they going to do? Can they not team up? And you know what I mean? Like, they don't want to think about these things because, again, that these are all very human qualities, and sometimes it's easier to distance yourself from that because it makes it easier to just tell these stories. But Batwoman is fairly, like, she does relate, I think, somewhat more so than I would say, like, Batman, like, to us, just being in that type of relationship, being in a relationship to the point where you would want to get married, that you have to have some sort of human emotion to make that happen. That depends now, because, I mean, like, post-Convergence, now we have DC being like, and who cares about continuity? Ugh. So there may be a writer who comes along and says, no, I want this character and that character to be married, and DC might say that's fine, because what does it matter? Because that doesn't affect any other continuity, because then over here I could have those characters not be married, and who cares? Now, it could just be that they don't care.
Well, if you don't care about couples being together, why are you so forcibly, ever since the New 52 started, why have you forcibly pushed Superman and Wonder Woman to be a couple?
I'm sure part of that has to do with some degree of fan service, because there's a large there has to be a large community of people out there who are like, those two people should be together. Yeah. Like Lois Lane can't handle Superman. She's just a mortal woman.
She's not strong enough.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, like, and that, again, that goes back to the whole pantheon of gods. I mean, like, it's almost like Superman is Zeus, and, at least it's just with her and not with a whole bunch of ladies. So, I'm sure when people look at it, it makes more sense to them for Superman to be with Wonder Woman. They have a lot more in common, I'm sure, they think,
When I first heard that they were going to do the book of Superman and Wonder Woman, my first horrifying thought was the fact that I remembered what happens in The Dark Knight Strikes 2. When you have that massive section in the book where it's just them, like, dry humping each other in space, and then when it was just not a great thing to remember.
No, and to some degree this is a palate cleanser then from that, because Frank Miller's take on what Superman and Wonder Woman should have been doing, I don't know. I mean, like, there are people out there who really do like that book. They see something in it I don't see. Yeah. But that sequence, I was like, what are you doing, Frank? Like, why? Like, is this just something you wanted to see? Is this where you thought things should go? What is the point of any of this? At least, again, where DC is now, it just seems more or less like they're like, this just makes more sense. At least there was some thought behind it. Marriage aside entirely, it's just, these two people can handle each other and they work together a lot.
So then they say, a question could be asked, is it more to the fact that people don't like the revitalization of characters? Because, like, we see this kind of, like, saying, yes, like, Wonder Woman and Superman met together, okay, so forget Lois Lane, she's not really that important. But then we have, like, saying, so you like that revitalization of a character. Here's going to be a new one. Here's, like, say for example, Batgirl. We have Barbara Gordon within the New 52, and we have the excellent Gail Simone run that finished, and everyone loved it because it was such a, like, because it was Gail Simone writing Barbara Gordon again, and then she got kicked off the book, and then she got brought back onto the book.
Yep. And
then we get the odd announcement that, although I'm sure the book, I honestly have been, like, sporadically reading that book as kind of a whole, the new take on Batgirl, and then people blow up about a certain announcement because DC stuck their flag out and say, here's our new Batgirl. She looks everything that people wanted her to be. She's wearing a leather jacket, she's wearing Doc Martens, and she's hip and trendy. I sound way too much like a 90s person now.
But, you're like, what do you kids say nowadays?
Yeah, but, like, we're down with the hippity-hoppity crew. But it's more to the fact that they forcibly say, yes, here's our new writer. Bang.
Because here's the thing, like, DC can tell some great stories, and they can make some good decisions, but then
absolutely.
Sometimes they do things just because someone else is doing them. And I'm sure part of it was they took a look at what Marvel was doing. It was like, what are they doing over there? Are they making some younger decisions? If you're going to bring in some new readers that way, then we're going to do that too. And let's just make it happen. Just quick, do it. And I think it's just they don't plan things well enough, and they don't think about the fan reaction that they've gotten in the past. Because the fact is, people are always going to freak out over change. Like, they seriously will. It doesn't matter how much you prepare them for, until they, see it, actually, and they talk to other people about it. I mean, there are some people who embrace it. There certainly are. But there are plenty of very vocal fans who just don't like change outright. Doesn't matter what it is. They want the thing they've wanted for forever. Until they don't. Until they get to the point where, like, I've seen this too many times.
Yeah,
like, why don't
I'm
they ever do
bored.
anything new? And it's like, well, they don't do anything new because you get really angry when they try to do something new. In terms of dealing with something like this, they really should have just planned it a little more so.
Yeah.
I mean, Batgirl is a well-established character in the DC, mythos. I mean, the fact is, like I said, like, if you asked someone to name at least 2 female superheroes, she would probably be number 2 underneath.
Yeah, exactly.
They would probably confuse her and call her Batwoman or Batgirl, but it would be the same character. It would be Batgirl they were thinking of. They really need to consider, I think, especially DC does, taking a character like this and, again, trying to make her more reachable by a younger audience, trying to make her more relatable. When you have spent so much time having your characters not be super relatable. That doesn't mean that they're not, and that doesn't mean that there aren't fans out there who can relate to something that's going on in a Superman arc or a Batman arc or an Aquaman arc or whatever. But, you're making Barbara Gordon be like, nope, I'm your kind of your average teenager, except I'm also, like, incredibly smart, and, I also fight crime. And that kind of comes out of left field out of what you've been building. And so to just release it and be like, ta-da! Yes, she looks very much like, your modern youth.
Yeah.
And that is so different than what we were doing. We did nail, like, the colors are very similar. And she uses technology, like modern technology, which inevitably, like, a decade from now is going to date her.
I can use Facebook.
Exactly. I will use my camera phone, which will have something, who knows, it's completely different, Like, people will look back and be like, wow, how 2014 of her. It's just so different. It's so different. At the same time, not different to anyone just kind of looking in on this and not being a part of that, not being so ingrained in that world.
Exactly.
That's us, like, to someone who's like, I'm not hardcore DC. Like,
no, neither am I. If you would ask, like, which brand I would rather go for, I say, Marvel. Yeah.
Marvel. For me, I'm like, Image, IDW, whatever. So for me, looking at this, I was like, that's an interesting take on it. Cool. Like, I see what you're going for. You're definitely trying to bring in new readers, whatever. I could imagine, though, being a, like, huge fan of DC and, like, the way things have been and being like, what the hell is this? This isn't, this isn't the Batgirl I know. This isn't remotely anything that I know. Like, this is so far out of my understanding of what a superhero...
Why are they doing this?
Yeah, exactly. But it's just because of the way that it's presented.
Yes.
And it's funny, because if you had presented this after Convergence, people would have been like, oh, but it doesn't matter, because it's out of continuity. They could do whatever they wanted. But, people forget, of course, in comics, that they're like, they think to themselves, this is forever. And it's like, nothing in comics is forever.
Nope. Death is, I mean, what? Oh.
Well, there's certain characters. There's certain characters,
Yeah.
that are never coming back.
Thank God. But there was a panel recently where someone died and someone said, doesn't matter, they'll probably be back.
Right? And that's funny, because you get both sides of that. And it really does depend on the comic book reader that you're talking to. Like, the fact is, I initially, like I said, like, I saw the redesign for Batgirl, I was like, that's cool, like, whatever. I, of course, I did love the original version of Batgirl, the predecessor to this, absolutely. But in the back of my mind, I know that this doesn't have to be set in stone. Like, we will inevitably see a relaunch of Batgirl where she's completely different.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. But again, people who are attached to these characters in some way, they've been reading them for years and years, they don't think about it like that, because it's like everything's changing in, like, now. And even though they probably have seen changes over time, they forget that it happens,
Yeah.
Obviously, nowadays, people have changed their opinions on how comics and women in comics should be represented. And obviously that's due to major, in part, of the global advertising of the Marvel Cinematic Universe or the DC Cinematic Universe, whichever other way you want to put it. obviously you have people who are still stuck in certain time periods where they think some things should happen like this and other things should happen like that. Would you say that it's that Marvel and DC or Image or whichever character they want to put on screen and show off, they have to be super careful with how they're represented, because obviously they're trying to bring in the golden egg of comics, which is the new reader, which is ever so rare unless you have like a brand new character which people want to get interested in.
The Marvel and the DC cinematic universes are taking off, the more comic book editorial has to deal with the idea of trying to get new readers in and younger readers, and having to deal with the fact that younger readers have a very different idea of how gender roles should be handled. And so now they have to address it and they have to change things. And, you're seeing certainly more and more female writers and artists coming in. Now, that's not to say they haven't always been there. They have been. It's just you're seeing a great deal more of them, especially in the limelight, because thank you to social media, we get to know about all the things that are going on, especially when you look at what happened with Gail Simone being kicked off of the book and then being brought back on. A lot of that had to do with the fact that we got to know about it immediately. So I certainly think that we will always have instances where a gender role is mishandled, or an aspect of inclusion or diversity is mishandled, and I think for the most part nowadays it will have a lot to do less with that being intentional or expected and more with being misunderstood. I mean, we certainly have seen instances of that where it's like, oh, I didn't mean that, and it also will come from I think people being from different generations. I'm going to cite, of course, the Spider-Woman cover that was done by that Italian artist who was, again, much older, different generation, different take on how things are perceived, right?
Yeah, and of course people blew up about it.
Exactly. People got really upset about it. I, for one, was like, what is this? And, first of all, my biggest issue was it was just anatomically incorrect. Let's be honest. That was just poor anatomy right there.
It is, yeah.
And then, of course, part two, my other issue with that was you would never see a male superhero doing that. And if you did, you'd be like, what the hell is going on?
Well, maybe Nightcrawler, I guess.
Oh, maybe. I mean, yeah, that could be. I'll give you that one. But you're not putting Spider-Man like that, because that's just weird and uncomfortable. But for her to do it, it's like, whatever. But again, that comes from, he's from a different generation. The intent there was not to demean a woman in his eyes, because he's just like, no, that's just how it is. That's when I was doing this kind of stuff, that's how it was. So I did that. And oh, that's not what we do anymore? Well, I was unaware of that.
Yeah, you didn't tell me.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, first of all, editorial, you should have been like, I don't know about this. But then you have, of course, books like, Ms. Marvel, you have, the new Batgirl, even the new Black Canary book. And then you have this whole other side of Image coming in with books like Saga, where it's just filled with these very powerful female characters. And it's, unforgivingly graphic at the same time.
Definitely.
But in no way, shape, or form are any of those women a damsel in distress. And that book is one of the higher selling books that Image is doing. People know it. People who don't know anything about indie will go to it because it's like, oh, I heard a lot about this, and it's just an engaging story that doesn't necessarily put genders into roles because they're questioning everything.
Exactly. I mean, a great series from Image would also be like Rocket Girl, which is whenever because it comes out sporadically, people know the issue because they think, oh wow, it's a cool. It's a cool, interesting character. It doesn't happen to be that she's female, but it's the thought of the fact that she doesn't have to be, it's Rocket Man from the future. It's the fact it goes, Rocket Girl, here's your cover, go and enjoy yourself, because it's a fun, and I mean this wholeheartedly, it's a really good book. I really enjoy it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think, especially for the indie publishers, it's a little easier, of course, to take these female characters and to do whatever you want with them because they're not dealing with history. They just have new characters. Kamala gets to be the way she is because she is brand new.
Yeah.
When DC and Marvel they're trying to write a Wonder Woman book, I'm Captain Marvel book, a Black Widow book. You know, you're dealing with, you know, decades of history and trying to balance keeping what people remember while also changing things to make them progressive and new.
Exactly.
And it seems like an impossible feat. And for that, I got to say they're doing a pretty good job because, like I said, they're trying to keep everyone happy. And it's really hard to do that, if not impossible to do that. And I think, and I hope that we do start to see an influx of some new characters. And I don't just mean like just put out all new characters. I mean, do like what they did with Kamala and come out with a character that's developed. Don't just try something and just throw it out there and then try to figure it out later. Have a plan. And then try it, and then see the reaction you get. Don't just be like, well, we try to put out new characters and they never work out. It's probably because you didn't develop them fully enough. But that's where I think you're going to hopefully see the future of female superheroes. That doesn't mean get rid of the old ones.
No, definitely
But that's
not.
where I think you're going to see some of the more progressive attempts. Because they don't have to worry about anything. Because if nothing else, we have to remember DC and Marvel are businesses. And at the end of the day, they need to keep the lights on. So they can't take a character like Wonder Woman and just try something so out of like left field with her. Because at the end of the day, they need to sell books.
I mean, just as like a wild, kind of like a wild pitch. Imagine, just for the sake of it, the kind of people, the reaction that people would go under if, say, for example, they decide to say, "Oh yeah, Wonder Woman, she's not like white or like perfect or pearl, like she's not perfect or that. She's just a regular girl from Queens, and she just happens to be black."
Right.
Could you imagine like kind of the uproar that people saying, "No, this isn't Wonder Woman." No.
Oh no.
Yeah.
They would lose their minds. They would absolutely lose their minds. And you know what's funny? They could do that now because of the whole like non-continuity thing, and then everyone would just be like, "Oh, but that's not continuity. That's not real. That's not real," which is almost just as insulting. But at the same time, you could at least do it. But yeah, no, they couldn't handle that. They couldn't handle that at all. I mean, that's like as though like they said like, "Oh, and by the way, Batman is gay," and it's just like, so what if he was?
Yeah.
Like, what if we made a Batman that was? What would it matter? People would lose their minds. They would lose their minds over this. Because it's so not what they, like, that's completely changing, 40, 50 years of continuity, like, no. It doesn't matter if we've rebooted things a million times and, like, continuity always changes. No! That goes against everything that I know about this character. But if we created a character that had a similar backstory to Batman, and that character just happened to be gay, well, then that's totally different.
Yeah.
And that would, like, possibly be welcomed. Like, oh, that's neat. That's a new character. Cool, whatever. But we can't do that with Batman, because we need Batman to sell books and movie tickets.
Definitely. I mean, they can't risk the change of their poster boy.
Right, and, like, I disagree with that. But I disagree with that from a fundamental artistic and humanistic standpoint. But from a business aspect and, like, in that mindset, I understand that, but I don't agree with it at all.
It's annoying that they feel that kind of way, that they can't accept change so different that they fear that they're going to get shut down or they'll lose comic readers. Because I imagine, and remember a couple of weeks ago, this is like a few weeks ago, where people were like saying, yes, Jim Gordon's the new Batman. Did that? Not many people were bothered by it because they went, oh, it's still Snyder writing the book, it's going to be still good. But some people were like, oh, that's not Batman. It's not my Batman.
Oh, yeah. Like, people really got upset. By the way, I loved the idea. I was like, yeah, why don't we give Jim Gordon a chance?
Yeah.
Well, I want to see that. But again, I am not, like, I haven't been picking up Batman for the past 20, 25 years. Like, I haven't been, reading it for that long. So when I look at that, I go, because the fact of the matter is, they're not going to let Jim Gordon be in the Batman suit when Superman v Batman comes out. They're not going to do that. That's not going to happen. They're going to put Bruce Wayne back in the suit because they're afraid that the new reader is going to go into that store and be like, what is this? Well, that's Jim Gordon. He's Batman.
But
not in the movie
Batman
I just saw. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. But people forget that kind of thing. And they're like, even if this, like, for some people, it's like, this changes forever. It's never going to change. That's it. It's over. Like, that, no. Bruce Wayne's going to come back. Yeah. Which, of course, in a sense, ruins the idea of storytelling, too, because it's like, well, nothing is permanent.
The irony of a comic book reader.
Exactly. Kind
of on the wrapping up point, we started with this question at the beginning of the podcast where we said, have female characters within comics changed? So I put forward the question to you, it kind of reformatted in a way. Have female characters changed enough within the past couple of years that it basically says, yes, female characters have grown very popular for the right reasons and not for the wrong ones?
I think at this point in time, I can say, yeah, they have. I mean, we're still moving forward, of course. I mean, and comics as a whole are still moving forward. When you look at these characters, I always make sure that, when I'm talking about them or, if anyone's talking about them or I get really angry about something like Sue Storm, for example, you have to remember when they were created and the societal norms that they were created around. And then you have to remember that was a reality for a while. The negative things that people don't like about female superheroes was a reality for a while. And we certainly have started to move past that at this point, I would say. But the characters are also working on that. They're also working on moving past that. I think, Marvel and DC have done a very good job of that. When I think about this, though, I often think about Image and 1990s Image with Zealot and Voodoo and you know what I mean? These half naked female characters who were strong but not strong.
With spines that contort ridiculous levels.
Exactly. And now you look at Image. And
it's change.
It is you would never in a million years. I think if you went back in time and told them this is what Image is going to become, they would laugh at you.
Yeah.
Laugh at you that this is what it would become. No way. I mean, you have books like Witches and I said Saga and of course Rocket Girl. You know what I mean? You have all these books where it's there's no way these books came out of that, but they did. They came out of this creation here. But of course they get to tell their own stories and they don't have to connect to one another. So they have that ability to just start fresh. But at least if you look at that, you definitely see that the idea of especially creator-owned comics and how they want to tell a story and the way they want to portray women, I think significantly has changed. And I know that DC and Marvel are working on it. And, certainly the reveal of the new look of Batgirl maybe wasn't handled in the best way. But looking at the new Batgirl, looking at the new Ms. Marvel is evidence to me that they are starting to definitely move in the right direction. Now, that doesn't mean, of course, that they need to ignore what people originally got on board for comics. The fact is, people as a whole, both genders, were very different. We all have very different likes and comfort levels. So you know what? Certainly, if there were superheroes in the world, there would be some people who would be like, oh no, I'm ripped. I'm going to wear almost nothing because I feel really comfortable with it. But then there would be others that wouldn't. And it's just the fact that I feel like the two editorials need to start understanding that is a reality. That there could be both. And the fact that you're saying there can only be one is where the problem is. When you look at these two, new, very, popular books, I think they're starting to move in the right direction. And if they just keep going that way, I think we'll have a really nice blend and, still be able to honor the past to some degree while moving forward.
That was kind of the end of the point. We'll see. It's kind of the wrapping up point of the show. So this is what I ask everyone on the show. Could you recommend a book that you've been reading in the past couple of weeks and a book that you've read before that you would recommend to people to go and buy?
Oh, certainly. A book that I have recently picked up. Again, this has nothing to do with what we were talking about. No. But Harrow County, put out by Dark Horse. It's a horror book. I am in love with this book. Issue 4 just came out. I love horror. And I love really lovely art, and this book is watercolored, so it's spectacular looking. But of course, I am an indie fanatic, so I'm yes, do that. For a non-indie book, I have been really digging Marvel's 1872, and issue 2 just came out last week. That's of course the Wild West version of Battle.
Yes. I have been seeing a few shots of that. I'm thinking, I'm tempted.
You know what? If you like Western books or like even just Western movies, it's a really interesting take on Marvel, like as seen through the Wild West. And I like the fact, again, I know I'm only getting like the 4 or 5 issues for this miniseries, so we're gonna have to wrap this story up. You know, like there you go. Book that I have would just recommend that I have read in the past. Again, another indie book. I Killed Giants
Oh,
by Image.
please explain a bit more, because I've heard the title before and people have said that I should read it.
I Killed Giants is honestly one of the most moving and beautiful stories that I have read in comics in a very long time. It was sent to us, and I had it for a while, and it just literally just didn't get around to picking it up. And it's amazing. The art itself is black and white, very Asian inspired manga style to it, but not entirely manga. It's a book that you know, some people are going to really, really into, some people are going to really definitely feel a connection to, but overall, it's a story about a young girl who is dealing with a lot of like demons, like inner demons, you know, like things she's made up, you know, whatever. She's really heavy into like the pen and paper D&D world.
Yeah.
She has his whole fantasy world where, you know, there are giants in the world and she knows how to take care of them. And like, you know, she knows all the dangers of them. She finds it difficult to make friends, and there's just a lot more going on. And I don't want to spoil it because they're,
no. Yeah, I'm intrigued now. I'm intrigued.
you know, it's one volume. That's it. The trade paperback. That's all there is to it. They recently are signed on to possibly make a movie out of it. So it's kind of an exciting time. It came out years and years and years ago. It was something I had never heard of, and I feel like I was cheated by not knowing about it sooner. So,
well, for me, I would have to say, as a book that I've read, I've got 2 books that I've read recently. So, one that I've picked up that I've really enjoyed would be, again from Image, would be Pretty Deadly, and it's written by Kelly Sue DeConnick again, but it's such a strange and weird kind of story landscape and story kind of universe that I was just instantly, I was like, I like this. I really do.
Right? Yeah.
And I don't want to spoil it because it really grips you from the first page, and it's a great story that tells over the first couple of issues. Because yes, they're getting more issues coming out soon, but it's like one of those books that they don't feel pressure that they have to keep on pushing them out. And I can't wait until the next kind of issue comes out for it. But as a book that I would say, yeah, I would definitely go and pick that up as a regular. It's one of those. I hate to say, I hate to use the word like indie books, because then it makes me sound like I'm one of the people who goes, "Oh, I'm from Marvel," and I occasionally look at those indie books. Sometimes.
Right.
No, I mean I love all forms of comics because I just love reading them in general, and so seeing a book that I was like, this looks really weird, but I love it. I look forward to reading what comes next of it. And as a book,
really knows how to tell a story.
Yes, she does.
Oh my god!
And there's a book that I've been reading recently, and the other book I said I was reading recently, I would have to say, I honestly go and pick up either one of the newish. I would say go and pick up Spider-Gwen, because that was a real fun. That's had a real few great issues. Go and pick up Miss Marvel, because it's a fantastic run.
Oh, yeah.
Or, hell, if you really want to just joke around with the Marvel Universe, go and read The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl.
Oh, my... Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And there's a book, and kind of as like a final one, my book that I would recommend that I've read as one that people could go and pick up, I would go and, as the book that I brought up earlier, I would go and read the trade paperback of Batwoman Angel Elegy. Because you don't have to know anything about the character. I certainly didn't when I first picked it up. But it's such a beautiful drawn book that it makes you will not feel lost at all. It brings you up to date with the character. It's such a well drawn book. It's such a down to earth character that it's in Gotham, but it's like saying, yes, this is a kind of a normal character compared to those other ones. And you don't have to feel alienated by the backstory or anything, because this is your story, and it's a brilliant story, and I won't ruin it because it's a fantastic story. But it's basically at the start of it. It kicks off. She's in the prime of her superhero career, and it carries on from there. So definitely go and pick up Elegy, because it's such a good book.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned the art on that book, because the art is spectacular, and like you'll see like page layouts that you could have never imagined in that book, and they just work.
I mean, Williams is one of those artists that, I mean, you see it on his Sandman run as well. His books are just so out. The art is just so incredibly out there, and you see some of his posts on Twitter. He's like, "Yeah, I'm listening to Black Sabbath while I was drawing this," and you think, "How did you come up with that while you were listening to this?"
His brain just works in a beautifully different way. So.
Well, that's the end of the show. Thank you, Tiffany, for coming on the show. It was great to have you on the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun. I really had a great time. I gotta tell you, right before we started, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna be doing this by myself. Usually I'm on the couch with like 2 other guys who like, you know.
No, it was really good, and we'd love to have you back another time.
Oh, thank you. I'd love to come back.
For everyone out there, thank you for listening. If you could do us a favour, go over to Comic Pop and have a look at their videos. They're really great guys. They really are funny, and they really do know their stuff. And go and subscribe to their channel. Come with, and don't forget about me, of course.
Oh no, absolutely. Well, the subscribe button's right there.
Yeah, it's just big, red, bold. You can't really miss it.
You can't miss it. Yeah.
So, once again, everyone, thank you for joining us, and until next time, ta-ta, my friends.